Welcome. I'd really appreciate if you could drop a comment with your thoughts and reactions as you listen. Your feedback helps me craft better stories for you. Angela pulled up to the smoldering apartment building, sirens blaring in the distance. Fire crews swarmed the area, dousing the last few flames licking up the charred facade. She stepped out of the news van, camera in hand, eager to capture the drama. "Captain Taylor," Angela called out to the grizzled firefighter directing operations. "What can you tell me about the fire?" Taylor glanced over, frowning. "Not much to report yet, miss. Looks accidental. Started on the 3rd floor. We're still assessing damages and casualties." Angela followed him into the lobby, filming the scorched walls and melted furniture. "Any fatalities?" Hard to say at this point. Taylor led her past debris, coughing in the acrid air. "Stay close and don't wander off." On the 3rd floor, they found the source, a gutted apartment, walls blackened and collapsed. But something didn't feel right to Angela. The damage seemed inconsistent, more chaotic than a typical fire. "Look here," she said, zooming in on a scorched form amid the rubble. Even partially burned, the twisted position was unnatural. Taylor knelt down, brow furrowing. "This one didn't die from burns or smoke inhalation." He pointed to ligature marks on the wrists and neck. "Someone strangled this person before the fire." Angela's pulse quickened. A murder added an unexpected angle to the story. She followed Taylor down the hall, filming more bodies amid the wreckage. Some burned, others untouched by flames, but bearing wounds. Bite marks, slashes, broken bones. It was as if the residents turned violently against each other before perishing in the fire. "Captain, I think we have a bigger problem here," Angela said, a note of alarm creeping into her usually composed voice. Taylor nodded grimly. "I'm calling this in as a crime scene. We need to evacuate immediately." He radioed the order to his men. But static was the only response. Frowning, Taylor tried the building's landlines. Also dead. Even their cell signals had cut out. "We're trapped in here," Angela said quietly, a chill running down her spine. A crash from down the hall made them jump. Shadows moved beyond the smoke and dust, accompanied by strange grunts and moans that raised the hairs on Angela's neck. "Stay behind me," Taylor whispered, drawing his sidearm. They inched forward slowly, Angela filming over his shoulder. A figure lurched into view, one of the residents, burned and bloody. But its eyes were glassy, movements jerky. It lunged at them with a guttural snarl. Taylor fired a shot into its head, causing it to crumple. But the noise drew more shambling forms down the hall. "Run!" Taylor shouted, shoving Angela ahead of him. They sprinted for the stairwell as the things pursued them, moaning hungrily. Slamming the door shut, Taylor threw his weight against it as the creatures pounded on the other side. "What the hell is happening?" Angela panted, backing away in horror. Taylor met her gaze grimly. "I think this whole building has been infected with something, and now we're trapped in here with it." The pounding at the door intensified as dawn's first light filtered through the grimy windows. Angela helped Taylor brace against it, muscles straining. "There's too many," she gasped. "We need to barricade this." They shoved furniture against the door, piling anything not nailed down until the pounding faded into the distance. Sinking to the floor in exhaustion, Angela noticed Taylor clutching his side, blood seeping between his fingers. "You're hurt," she said. "Just a scratch," he gritted out. "More importantly, that thing bit me when it attacked." Angela's blood ran cold. "Virus. You think it spreads through bites?" Taylor nodded grimly. "We need to get out of here before the infection takes hold. Can you contact the others on the radio?" Angela fiddled with the handset to no avail. Still dead. "What do we do now?" "Gather supplies and head for the roof. With any luck, The choppers will have broken through the interference by now. They scoured the apartment, stuffing backpacks with food, water, first aid. Angela found a fire axe and handed it to Taylor. Out in the hall, the coast seemed clear for now. They hurried downstairs, guns drawn. On the second floor, a familiar figure shambled around the corner, the news cameraman who'd accompanied Angela. Only he was different now, eyes glazed, skin ashen. Jesus, Taylor breathed. This thing moves fast. They picked up the pace, checking each floor methodically. The lower levels were overrun with the infected, forcing them to take the stairs 2 at a time. On the ground floor, a survivor called for help behind a barricaded door. Taylor smashed it open to find a middle-aged woman huddled in a corner, sobbing. "Please, help me. They killed John." "It's okay, we've got you," Angela soothed. "What's your name?" "S. Samantha." A crash from the next room drew their attention. An infected was smashing its way through a window, drawn by the noise. Taylor shot it down, but 2 more appeared, then half a dozen. "Run!" he yelled, shoving Samantha ahead. They burst into the stairwell, swarming with the infected, and bolted up the steps. Angela risked a glance back. A tidal wave of diseased bodies poured after them. On the 3rd floor, Taylor collapsed against a wall, clutching his side in agony. "Go." "No way. We stick together," Angela said firmly. She and Samantha hauled him up, draping his arms over their shoulders. They fought their way up floor by floor, gunning down the infected whenever they caught up. By the 5th level, Taylor could barely stand. His skin was deathly pale, sweat pouring off him. "Please, leave me," he begged through chattering teeth. Angela ignored him, dragging him on. Finally, they reached the roof access, barricading the door behind them. Samantha helped lower Taylor to the ground as Angela scanned the skyline desperately. The sun was setting, bathing the city in an eerie orange glow. No choppers were coming. They were trapped up here with a dying man and thousands of infected below. Angela sank to her knees in defeat. All she'd wanted was a story. Now they were fighting just to survive the night. In the distance, a lonely howl cut through the dusk, sending a chill down her spine. Whatever had started this plague was still out there, and it was hunting. The old hospital loomed ahead, its shadow stretching long across the overgrown lawn in the fading light of dusk. Jake pulled up and killed the engine, peering through the windshield at the crumbling brick facade. It had stood empty for decades, but rumors of what really happened within its walls had only grown darker with time. "You sure about this?" Emma asked from the passenger seat. "Place gives me the creeps." Jake turned to smile reassuringly at her. "It'll be perfect for the film. Just need to get a feel for the layout and locations. We'll be in and out before nightfall." In the back, Tyler and Claire exchanged a skeptical look but said nothing. They had all heard the stories, even if Jake dismissed them as local legends. An outbreak in the 1950s had shuttered the hospital under a veil of mystery. Some claimed the doctors conducted gruesome experiments on patients in secret basement labs. Others spoke of a dormant virus awakened from its slumber. The 4 friends climbed out of the car, zipping up hoodies against the deepening chill. Jake led the way toward the main entrance, pushing through the overgrown shrubs obscuring the doors. With a grunt, he shoved against the metal bars blocking the way. To their surprise, they gave way with a rusty groan. Didn't expect it to be unlocked," Jake said, peering into the gloom beyond. A dim glow emanated from within, as if some power still flowed through long-abandoned circuits. An eerie silence hung over the foyer where patients and staff had once bustled. Dust coated every surface, undisturbed for decades. Jake switched on his flashlight and swept the beam across peeling wallpaper and faded portraits. A reception desk stood empty, files and paperwork scattered across the floor. Wheelchairs and gurneys were left abandoned, as if everyone had fled in a panic. Creepy, Tyler muttered, kicking at a pile of rubble. Let's find somewhere less haunted to shoot. But Jake was already moving deeper inside, entranced by the decaying grandeur. Emma followed reluctantly while Claire lingered by the doors, peering out into the gathering dusk. Guys, maybe we should come back tomorrow, Claire said nervously. As if in response, the lights flickered, then died, plunging the foyer into gloom. Jake's flashlight beam cut through the shadows, picking out details that made their skin crawl. Stains on the floor they prayed were only rust. Scratches on the walls as if from frantic fingernails. A strange noise echoed from somewhere below, a low moan that raised the hairs on their necks. Jake led the way to a stairwell, descending creaking steps into a basement level. The smell hit them first, damp and metallic, like old pennies. At the bottom, a heavy steel door stood ajar, lights flickering fitfully within. Jake pushed it open to reveal a tiled laboratory, equipment and files left scattered in disarray. Stainless steel tables were stained dark, manacles bolted to their surfaces. A chill ran through them at the implications. In an alcove, they found cages stacked floor to ceiling, holding remnants of small animal bones. A cold room held rows of shelves once filled with specimens in jars, now collecting dust and cobwebs. A noise drew their attention to the far corner, where shadows seemed to shift and breathe with a life of their own. Tyler swung his flashlight that way, and they recoiled in horror. A withered shape was curled in the darkness, milky eyes fixing on them as it opened its jaws in a soundless shriek. It launched itself at them with impossible speed, limbs twisting at unnatural angles. Claire screamed as cold, dead hands grasped for her, rotting flesh sloving from gray bones. Jake grabbed her and pulled her back just in time, the thing colliding with the steel door with a sickening crunch. They stared in shock and revulsion as it dragged itself upright once more, moaning as if hungry, a wordless plea for help from something no longer human. Tyler swung his flashlight like a club, caving in its skull with a wet crack. It collapsed, the lights flickering out as the last spark of life left its eyes. Silence fell, but for their ragged breathing. In the darkness, they clung to each other, hearts pounding. What was this place? What horrors had been committed within these walls? A scraping sound broke the stillness, echoing from the stairwell. As one, they turned flashlights that way to find it blocked by more withered figures shambling down, drawn by the noise and scent of prey. Eyes like milk stared back, jaws working soundlessly. "Run!" Jake yelled, shoving Claire ahead of him. They bolted up the steps, the things lurching after them with unnatural speed. At the top, Jake slammed the heavy door shut and threw the bolts just as grasping hands reached through. They backed away, flashlights sweeping wildly as moans and scratches emanated from behind the steel. "What the hell is happening?" Tyler gasped. Those things, they were dead. A low rumble shook the floor, dust sifting down from the high ceiling. The lights flickered once more before dying, plunging the foyer into an abyssal dark. In the distance, more noises echoed. Doors banging, furniture scraping across tiles, and a chorus of moans rising in volume. "We need to get out of here, now," Emma cried, tugging Jake's arm. But when they ran for the front doors, they found them barred from the outside, trapped in the depths of the haunted hospital. A nightmare was unfolding around them, and the dead were rising. The group huddled together in the darkness, flashlights cutting feeble swaths through the gloom. "We're trapped," Claire whispered, voice trembling. Jake ran a hand through his hair, mind racing. "We need to barricade ourselves somewhere secure until morning. Somewhere with only one entrance we can defend." "The reception area," Emma suggested. "Only one set of doors, and we can pile furniture against it." They crept back through the foyer, lights picking out shambling figures roaming the halls. The dead seemed drawn by sound and movement, moaning as they searched with sightless eyes. Reaching reception, they pushed over a heavy desk, adding chairs and filing cabinets to block the doors. Heartbeats slowed as they caught their breath, huddling together against the far wall. "What the hell is happening?" Tyler whispered. Claire shook her head. "I don't understand it either. But the basement. It looked like some kind of lab. You think they were experimenting on people?" A chill went through them at the thought. Jake remembered his mother's final days in this very hospital. The rumors of secret procedures performed after dark. Had she suffered the same fate? "We need to get out of here at dawn," he said firmly. 6 hours till then. We stay quiet, keep our barricade strong, and wait it out. Time crawled by as they listened to the dead shuffling the halls. Occasional thumps and moans sounded against their barrier, making them jump. After an hour of tense silence, Emma broke it quietly. "Jake, tell us about your mom." He took a shaky breath. "She was sick with something rare, not responding to treatments. One night she called me, terrified. Said she heard screams from the basement. Next day she was delirious, talking nonsense. 2 weeks later." His voice cracked. Claire squeezed his arm. "I'm so sorry, but maybe there's a connection to what's happening now. If they were experimenting back then too." A crash from the hallway jolted them. A withered hand pawed at the gap under the doors as something shuffled outside, moaning hungrily. They watched with dread. Flashlights trained on the barricade. "We need to draw them away," Jake said suddenly. "Then make a run for the exit while they're distracted." "Are you crazy?" Emma hissed. "That's suicide." "We'll use the fire alarm," he insisted. "The noise and flashing lights should draw them off long enough for us to slip past." They argued in tense whispers, but agreed it was their best chance. Under Jake's instruction, Tyler pried open a ceiling panel and yanked the alarm lever. A deafening klaxon blared as strobes pulsed the halls. They listened intently. Sure enough, shuffling footsteps receded as the dead were lured away. "Now!" Jake cried, heaving aside the barricade. They bolted from reception, flashlights stabbing the darkness. A few shambling figures turned their way, but most were drawn down a side corridor by the blaring alarm. Rounding a corner, Jake skidded to a halt with a gasp. A withered form blocked their path, milky eyes fixing on them. It lunged with impossible speed, but Jake swung his flashlight, caving its skull. They sprinted on, the exit doors in sight ahead. A scream rang out behind. Tyler, clutching his bleeding arm where teeth marks showed through a tear in his jacket. "Doe!" he yelled through gritted teeth. "I'll hold them off. Just go." But Jake grabbed his uninjured side, dragging him along as the dead closed in from behind. Emma wrenched open the doors and they spilled into the night, the klaxon fading behind them. Gasping for air, they leaned against the car, watching the hospital for any signs of pursuit. Nothing emerged from the shadows. As dawn lightened the sky, they realized they were free. But one of their own was now infected, and somewhere within those walls, the source of the plague still lurked, waiting to be unearthed. The scraping of wheels against the tarmac seemed unnaturally loud in the still evening air. Claire peered out the rain, spattered window as Flight 447 taxied to a halt at the tiny island airport. Only a few dim lights punctured the darkness around the single runway. A sense of unease prickled the back of her neck long before the man in 23 started screaming. By the time the flight attendant subdued him, it was too late to turn back. Now she studied the empty terminal warily as the cabin door hissed open. John emerged behind her, cap pulled low over feverish eyes. "Something's not right here," he muttered, but the passengers were eager to disembark after the attack. Claire fell in with them as they descended the stairs. The terminal's interior lights flickered weakly, casting shadows through piles of abandoned luggage and spilled coffee rings staining the tile floor. At the front desk, Claire picked up the phone, but only static answered. An eerie quiet had fallen over the airport. "Hello?" Her voice echoed in the cavernous space. No response came. John joined her, worry etched on his sheened face. "We need to find the others, see if they know what's going on." They moved down the corridor, calling out tentatively. In the staff lounge, Claire gasped at more signs of struggle. Overturned chairs, papers strewn about. On the floor, she spotted the pilots' caps, stained dark. A dragging sound came from nearby. John grabbed her arm, eyes wide. "We shouldn't have come here. This place isn't safe." But the others had followed the noises down the hallway, out of sight around the corner. Claire and John hurried after, dread pooling in her gut. Around the bend, a grisly scene met their eyes. On the floor lay the remains of an airport worker, torn flesh hanging from savage wounds. Even as they watched, it twitched and let out an inhuman groan. Its eyes rolled to fix on them, filled with madness instead of life. With a lurch, it dragged itself towards them on mangled limbs. Claire stumbled back with a scream. John shoved her behind him as the thing lunged. Its grasping fingers raked his uniform. Then it was upon him, jaws snapping. Claire turned and ran blindly, the pilot's screams echoing behind her. Ahead, the others fled the same horror, scattering in panic through the terminal's maze. Dark shapes detached from the shadows, shambling towards the fresh meat. She careened into a side corridor and slammed a security door behind her, locking it just as heavy footsteps approached. Leaning against the metal, Claire struggled to control her gasping breaths. Through streaming eyes, she saw another survivor huddled in the corner. A young man, hugging his knees and rocking back and forth. His wide eyes met hers. "They're coming." The security door rattled behind them, the creature's claws scraping against the metal. Claire slid the meager bolt into place and turned to survey their prison. Flickering screens lined the far wall, feeding grainy footage from cameras around the airport. On one, a dark shape loped down the terminal, dragging something limp behind it. She swallowed back a surge of nausea. The young man huddled in the corner hadn't moved. "My name's Claire. Can I take a look at that?" she asked gently. He nodded mutely. She peeled back the bloodied fabric, biting her lip at the deep gouges beneath. Rummaging through the first aid kit, Claire cleaned and dressed the injury as best she could. "I'm Mark," he finally said through chattering teeth. Outside, heavy footsteps echoed down the hall, joined by rasping breaths and guttural moans. Claire peered through the small window to see shadowy forms shuffling past, drawn by some primal instinct. She pulled the blind shut with a snap. "We need to barricade the door," she said, dragging over a filing cabinet. Mark helped as best he could with his uninjured arm. When they finished, Claire sank to the floor, exhaustion dragging at her limbs. On the screens, the creatures prowled endlessly through the empty building, hunting. She watched numbly until Mark broke the silence. "Do you think anyone else got away?" Claire shook her head. "I don't know. It all happened so fast." Images flashed through her mind. The crazed passenger's screams, the pilot's blood-soaked uniform. She pushed them down, focusing on steadying her breathing. Mark shivered violently beside her. Claire checked his bandages. The wound was angry and inflamed. Fever burned in his eyes. "Try to rest," she said gently. "I'll keep watch." But as the long night dragged on, Mark only grew worse. His mutterings turned to delirious pleas as the infection took hold. Claire bathed his forehead with a damp cloth, helpless against the encroaching dawn of his madness. On the screens, movement caught her eye. A dark shape separated from the others, moving with purpose. It tracked slowly across the terminal, following a trail only it could see. Claire leaned closer, straining to make out details in the grainy feed. A shock of recognition jolted through her numb mind. Silver glinted dully at its wrist, catching the flickering lights. It was the crazed passenger from the plane, the one who started it all, and it was tracking them by scent to this isolated room. Mark cried out, thrashing in the throes of fever. Claire gathered him close, murmuring reassurances though she felt none herself. Outside, heavy footsteps approached as the creature zeroed in on their hiding place. She steeled herself for the final stand. A scraping came at the door, then a bang that shook the frame in its mounting. Mark screamed and Claire clutched him tighter, closing her eyes against the inevitable end. But suddenly, a deafening crack split the air. The banging ceased. Claire opened her eyes to see a dark shape slump slowly to the floor, revealed by the flickering lights. A figure stood behind it, wielding a fire extinguisher stained with black blood. Their eyes met through the window, and recognition lit the stranger's face. "Claire," a muffled voice called through the door. "It's me, John. I've come to get you out of here."